There is a certain kind of kitchen clutter that is harder to let go of than anything broken, expired, or obviously useless. It is the perfectly decent item you keep because you might need it someday. For many women over 40, these just-in-case kitchen items are not sitting there because we forgot about them. We know they are there. We keep them because getting rid of something usable can feel wasteful, careless, or somehow irresponsible. That is what makes this kind of clutter different. The problem is not simply that the kitchen is full. It is that every usable object seems to require a reason strong enough to let it go. But a calmer kitchen does not come from preparing for every possible future. It comes from making room for the life you are actually living now. So today, we are looking at 9 kinds of kitchen items that often survive for years. On one sentence, I might need this later. And as we go, notice that the real question is not whether an item could still be useful. Almost anything could be useful under the right circumstances. The better question is whether keeping it is still useful to you. Maybe you have 3 vegetable peelers, several wooden spoons that all feel almost the same, 2 can openers, 4 bottle openers, or a drawer full of spatulas that arrived one replacement at a time. None of them are broken. That is exactly why they stay. If one stopped working, the decision would be easy. But when all of them still function, choosing only the ones you use can feel strangely uncomfortable. What if the good one breaks? What if someone else is cooking? What if you need several at once? There is nothing wrong with having a real backup. But there is a difference between one backup you chose intentionally and a collection that formed because you never quite made the decision. Look at which tools your hand reaches for without thinking. Those are the ones earning their space. The rest may still work, but still works does not automatically mean still belongs here. You do not need to identify the single perfect peeler or the best wooden spoon in the world. Keep the ones you naturally use. Let the others move on while they are still usable. That is not waste, it is a decision. Maybe it is a spiralizer, a mini waffle maker, a sandwich, press, a fondue set, a specialty blender, or another appliance tied to a very specific chapter. At the time, the purchase may have made complete sense. You were making a certain recipe every week. Your family routine was different. You entertained more often. You were trying a new way of eating. You pictured yourself using it all the time. Then life changed. The appliance did not. This is where the money you already spent can make the decision feel heavier than the object itself. You remember what it cost. You remember the excitement of buying it. You may even feel that letting it go means admitting the purchase was a mistake. But the money is already spent, whether the appliance sits in your cabinet for another 5 years or not. Keeping it cannot make the purchase more successful. What it can do is keep an old decision present in your current kitchen. Sometimes the most accurate thing you can say is, "This made sense for a season," and that season is over. You are allowed to stop storing equipment for a routine you no longer have. Maybe it is a set of plates, wine glasses, serving bowls, teacups, or decorative dishes that are considered too nice for ordinary life. There is nothing wrong with keeping special things you truly enjoy. The problem is when special quietly becomes never. You may be giving a large part of a cabinet to dishes that have not been used in years, while the things you reach for every day are squeezed around them. These pieces can be difficult because their value is not only practical. They may have been expensive. They may have been a gift. They may remind you of a wedding, a parent, a holiday tradition, or a version of your family that has changed. So do not rush the decision. Instead, separate 2 questions. Do I love the meaning attached to this? And do I want to keep the object itself? Sometimes the answer to both is yes. Then keep it, and perhaps even use it. Sometimes you realize you have been protecting an object you do not actually enjoy because letting it go felt disrespectful. The memory does not disappear because the dishes leave. And if something is too good to use but too burdensome to store, it may be worth asking whether good has become another reason to postpone a decision. This category can turn into a small unfinished puzzle. A container without a lid still looks useful. A lid without a container still looks perfectly good. And because there is always a chance that the missing piece is hiding somewhere, both survive another month, then another. This is a useful place to notice the difference between an item that works now and an item that might work if something else appears later. Match what matches. Keep the sizes you actually use. And if a lid has been waiting for its missing container for months, you do not have to keep reopening that question every time you search the drawer. This is not about creating a color-coordinated container system. It is not about buying matching sets. It is simply about removing a small category of unresolved objects. The container you can use today has a job. The lid that only makes sense in an imagined reunion with a missing container may not. A few extras can make life easier, but there is a point where backup starts creating its own work. Maybe you have several unopened bottles of the same source, more foil than your household is likely to use for a long time, stacks of disposable cups or multiples of an item you keep buying because you cannot remember how many are already stored. The instinct behind this is understandable. Running out is inconvenient. Buying extra can feel prepared. And in a busy household, having a little buffer can be genuinely useful. The question is how much buffer your household actually needs. Because once the backup becomes too large, you have another system to maintain. You have to know where everything is. You have to see what you already own before buying more. Some items may get pushed behind newer ones, and a large supply can become invisible simply because it no longer fits where you normally look. The answer is not never buy extras. It is to decide what enough looks like for your real household. 1 extra might be enough. 2 might be enough. A larger supply might make sense for something you use constantly. The number itself is not the point. The point is that prepared should make daily life easier, not give you another inventory to manage. This often happens with pans, cutting boards, utensils, graters, knives, or small gadgets. You owned one version. It annoyed you. Maybe it was awkward, flimsy, dull, difficult to clean, or simply unpleasant to use. So eventually you bought a better one. And the better one works, but the old one never left. It became the backup. There is something almost funny about this when you see it clearly. The item was frustrating enough to replace, but apparently still too good to release. Because it functions, you feel as though you need a more serious reason. But I do not like using this can be enough. You do not need to build a legal case against a kitchen tool before you donate it. If you always reach past the old version to get the better one, your behavior has already answered the question. Keeping one sensible backup is different from keeping every previous version. You chose the replacement for a reason. You can trust that decision. Maybe it is a huge punch bowl, a 3-tier stand, a giant roasting pan, 12 matching dessert cups, a holiday platter, or serving pieces designed for a kind of entertaining that belong to another chapter of your life. These can be harder than ordinary kitchen tools because they are connected to identity. You may not simply see a platter. You may see the years when everyone came to your house. You may remember holiday dinners, birthdays, children around the table, or the version of you who had the energy and need to host differently. That is not silly. Objects can carry memories because we connect them to real moments. But keeping every object from every chapter can make the present kitchen responsible for storing the past. You do not have to erase that chapter. You might keep one piece that still feels meaningful. You might use something differently. Or you may decide that remembering those years does not require storing the entire serving collection. Ask yourself, if I needed this kind of item again, would I truly be glad I stored it all this time? Or could I find another reasonable solution? You do not have to predict the future perfectly. You only have to make a reasonable decision for the life you have now. These are often smaller things, but they can carry a surprising amount of emotional weight. Cake decorating tips you plan to master: a sushi mat, a bread-proofing basket, tiny pastry molds, a specialty ingredient bought for one ambitious recipe, a stack of jars you intended to turn into an organized pantry system. These items are not only objects. They can represent intentions, a hobby you meant to start, a skill you thought you would learn, a version of home life you imagined you would eventually create. That is why seeing them can produce a little hesitation. You are not only deciding whether to keep the sushi mat. You may feel as though you are deciding whether to give up on the person who was going to learn to make sushi. But those are not the same decision. You can let go of equipment without closing yourself off from learning something later. If the project still genuinely excites you, keep the tools and give the project a realistic place in your life. If the item mostly makes you think I really should do that someday, it may be functioning more like an obligation than an invitation. Your kitchen does not need to hold every abandoned or delayed intention. This one often sounds generous: extra mugs, an older toaster, baking pans, duplicate utensils, containers, a small appliance you replaced. You may think my daughter might need this when she moves, or someone in the family could use it, or I should not get rid of something perfectly good. And sometimes there really is a person who wants it. If so wonderful, give it to them. The difficult version is when nobody has asked for it, and there is no actual plan. Then your kitchen becomes a waiting room for somebody else's possible future need. A simple boundary can make this easier. Offer the item. Give people a reasonable chance to claim it. If nobody wants it, you are allowed to donate it or pass it on in another way. You can still be generous without becoming the long-term storage system for objects other people may never need. And letting a useful object leave your home gives it the opportunity to be useful somewhere else now, rather than remaining in a cabinet indefinitely. This is the pattern underneath all 9 categories. Just in case clutter is often difficult, because there is no obvious failure. The object is not broken. It is not expired. It may even be valuable. So you keep searching for a reason that feels important enough to overrule the fact that it is still good. You paid for it. Someone gave it to you. You might need it. Someone else might need it. The missing piece might appear. The old hobby might return. The dinner party might happen. All of those things are possible. But your kitchen cannot comfortably prepare for every possible future at the same time. There is also a familiar decision-making pattern called the sunk cost effect. Past investments of money, time, or effort can influence whether we continue with something even when those past costs cannot be recovered. That does not mean every unused kitchen item is an example of a psychological bias, but it does offer a useful question. Am I keeping this because it serves me now, or because I do not want the earlier purchase effort or intention to feel wasted? That distinction can make a difficult decision much clearer. You can appreciate what something cost and still let it go. You can admit an item is perfectly good and still decide it is no longer right for your kitchen. You can be grateful for a gift without keeping it forever. You can change your mind about a purchase. And you can stop asking your present home to store objects for every imagined version of your future life. You do not need to empty the kitchen today. Choose one small category: duplicate peelers, unused mugs, plastic lids, one appliance shelf. Look at what belongs to the life you actually live, and what belongs mostly to, maybe. Then make one decision. That is enough. A calmer home does not require a dramatic weekend purge. Sometimes it begins with fewer objects asking you the same question every time you open a drawer. After 40, protecting your energy can look very ordinary. It can look like opening a cabinet and finding less that you have to justify, rearrange, remember, or save for someday. The kitchen still works. You still have what you need. But there is less waiting in the background. Less guilt attached to useful things. Less pressure to predict the future perfectly. And a little more room for the life you are actually living now. If this kind of gentle, practical approach to a calmer home feels useful, subscribe to Calm Her Daily. And in the comments tell me which just-in-case kitchen item is hardest for you to let go of, not because it is broken, but because it is still perfectly good. Sometimes naming why we are keeping something is enough to make the next decision easier.